what were those maybe instinctual things you did that really helped set you up for success, and articulate that and give that as a playbook.
Yes.
Gen Z is really good about following a playbook.
Yes.
So for example, they may not know that it's valuable to go into the office and have FaceTime.
Yes.
That's really, really valuable. If you're working in an environment where it's hybrid, make it a point to be the person who's in the office the most.
Yes.
You will get noticed, and you'll be the person that they tap and say, wow, look at her, look at him, look at that initiative. Goes back to author-editor. Author, traits of the author, take ownership, show initiative, display critical thinking. You walk into a workplace with those three things kind of in your back pocket, you're going to do pretty well.
Like, be specific if you're going to ask questions. And I would say this for both, Gen Z and older leaders, make sure that you're asking good questions that are going to require a real answer.
This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast. I'm your co-host, Brandon Smith, and I'm joined today with my co-host and co-founder, Randy Hain. Randy, good morning, my friend.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So our show today is going to be a little bit different than our traditional show. Our traditional show, we take on all topics related to leadership. This will have a vibe to that, but it's really going to be about the younger generation coming into the workforce. What are things that either we can be doing as managers, leaders, mentors for them, but also maybe what are some good nuggets of wisdom that would be beneficial for them to learn and know. So you and I set this conversation up without any real guardrails or ground rules. We just wanted to dive in and explore. So Randy, I'm going to let you jump in first. What do you think is a good kind of opening for us as we're thinking about this new generation, Gen Z, entering the workforce? What are some things that maybe you're noticing that you think is maybe different about this generation, or something that we might need to be aware of?
I love this topic. I absolutely love it. And it's so funny because I think in some of our just normal interactions, you and I often talk about this, and it is great to do a show about it. So I hope that the audience will be patient with us, because we're going to go all over the place, but hopefully we're going to bring you to a place where you're going to walk away with something practical as a leader that you can do to help young professionals. But also, if you're a young professional or about to join the workforce, you're going to get some nuggets as well that you can use. I think the way that I would sort of lay our foundation today is, let's talk about how both leaders need to maybe accept responsibility. There's maybe an obligation there that we have got to invest in this generation. Because I think we both have talked about this. I get frustrated, and sometimes I even do it, with people that just wag their finger at young professionals and say, they need to figure it out. I can't believe they did that or said that, or they're thinking that. Well, we have an opportunity and an obligation to invest in them. But I also think that young professionals need to think about, okay, you came into the workforce very different time maybe than some of us Gen Xers and baby boomers did. And you've got some great ideas and things to add, but there are things that you can still learn. So how do we come together and learn from each other? I think that's the way I'd set today up.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's also important as part of our foundation that we acknowledge every young generation got knocked when they entered the workforce.
Absolutely.
So the boomers were the hippies.
Yes.
These hippies need to get their act together.
Yes.
Right? Gen X were the slackers.
Yeah.
Right? Millennials were entitled. And then now Gen Z, I hear different kind of labels floating around that. Nothing's really landed necessarily, but every generation has kind of their knocks. So maybe then a good starting place, given that every young generation, 23 to 28-year-olds kind of coming into a workplace, all have their areas to grow. And so there's some commonalities, but what maybe is different about Gen Z? What have you noticed or heard? What are some things you think, in this way, maybe they're a little further behind other generations, or it's something we may need to be a little more aware of?
Well, the good news is we're both fathers of Gen Z children, so we definitely get to see it firsthand. So there are a couple of things, and I want to be very careful to not jump into the chorus that tends to blame COVID for everything. I think there is a tendency, it's the COVID generation. Yes, COVID had a tremendous impact on society. It did change a lot about how we work and interact and communicate. I think it had a role to play, but I think that there are a couple of things that I see. Gen Z has immediate access to information that was not really what we had kind of growing up. I'm dating myself, but remember Encyclopedia Britannica? We have to go to the library and do research. Information.
People sold those door to door.
Exactly.
I bought one.
But information now is immediately accessible. So there isn't the process of learning that we had to go through. Everything is like instantly available, which kind of spills over to instant gratification. I want what I want and I want it now. I can get whatever I want and I can do whatever I want. And I can design my own career, design my own life. I can do whatever I want. And I don't say that in a disparaging way. I just think it's an expectation I see in a lot of Gen Z that I can map out whatever kind of life I want, build the designer life, the cafeteria life, and that's what I'm going to do. And that sounds great in principle. Sounds great on paper. It's not really reality, though. It's not really the way that the world works. So I think they're coming into the workforce with a set of expectations that has been fostered and influenced some degree by social media, maybe by our educational institutions in society. But when you get to the workforce, and this is where you and I live every day, we're working with leaders of big organizations every day, they're frustrated with these expectations and ways of operating that Gen Z brings into the workforce. So I think that's something that we've got to just be mindful of, that there is a different way of seeing the world. To your point, we were all rebels. We were all kind of the kids that, what's wrong with them? And we're probably doing the same to Gen Z today. But we've got to figure out a way to unlock the code about how they think, but also maybe have an influence on them to help them be successful in today's business world. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree completely. I'm not quite sure where it comes from.
Yeah.
So we have this idea, you're right, that people feel like I should be able to make my career and kind of create that menu. And people can do that after they've worked for 20 years.
Yes.
Typically. You have to earn the right to do that.
Exactly.
And they think they're already there. Now, part of it's because they watch an Instagram influencer that, is making $5 million a year and they're 23 years old talking about their beauty protocol. And they think, I want that life. Or they're being told by the millennials, you should be able to, go hiking at 4 o'clock if you want to. And that's not necessarily realistic. So I think there's a challenge there. I think that's part of it. I think there's this idea that they want to be able to kind of create that. But I don't think they realize that this 20-something is such an important decade.
Yes.
It's really a great decade to set yourself apart. But you're not going to do that if you're taking vacations all the time or hiking all the time or delivering kind of bare minimum. I think that's I think one of the other challenges. And to kind of build on that a little bit, there's this notion that's become more common and proliferated that if you're getting extra work beyond what your kind of work responsibilities are, you should say no, and you should immediately ask for more money. Immediately push back. And that's new. That's typically not how the workplace was. You take on extra work and show you can handle more, and then you get promoted. People get promoted in manager jobs when they're doing the manager job.
Right.
Not because they look handsome or they've been there for 2 years.
Right.
It's because they were doing the job. And so there's this notion that, gosh, I don't want to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. That's not fair. They're taking advantage of me. And let me be fair. Everyone can hold on to that belief. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just need to understand the trade-offs with that. If you say, I want to quiet quit, that's great. Don't expect yourself to get promoted or get future opportunities. So I think there's something there too that is important for us to acknowledge.
So hopefully this will not be too tangential, but if you and I were to go on a 2-year foreign mission trip, let's say that you and I went to Africa and we're working with people that really needed help, and we were out there in the front line of the mission world doing all kinds of great work, and that was our world for 2 years. And we came back and immediately tried to plug into corporate America. I think that we would have a really difficult time because we will have 2 years of learned behavior. We will have learned a completely different way to think and operate. And you're asking us to go into IBM or AT&T or Chick-fil-A or whatever and become a corporate citizen. It's a little bit like that when I think about this generation. They are growing up with influences, cultural influences. Things are impacting how they think. And then all of a sudden they graduate from college and they're being told, go find a job, okay? And they're asked to come into the corporate world. Well, the corporate world is not the mission field in Africa, and it's probably not what they've been learning in terms of the influences that are in their life. And you talk to any Gen Z, and they are on multiple platforms. They're following influencers. They get their information from sources potentially that could be suspect, but then I think all generations do that. So I hear you, and I think that they're coming in with, they've been formed. by places that maybe are not necessarily in alignment with corporate America. So what do we do about that? So if I am a leader and I'm listening to this podcast, my wish for you, the thing that I would like to convey to you is stop looking at that generation with your arms folded. Stop wagging your finger. Stop standing across the bridge and saying, you guys are never going to be able to cross because you just can't figure it out. They are the future of the world. They are the future of business, the future of the world. They are the future. It sounds like a cliche, but obviously they are. Well, if you believe that, then we have an opportunity, a responsibility to do something about it. You and I both mentor young professionals. It's some of my favorite time to invest. We both go to college campuses and talk to seniors all the time. We're working with executives that have lots of young professionals. So you and I are in this world every day, and I think we kind of know what we're talking about. And my encouragement to leaders is get off the sidelines and jump in the game. Right now, if you're listening, think about in the next quarter at work, how can I go invest in 2 or 3 young professional relationships? Can I go to my college where I graduated from 20, 30, 40 years ago and offer my time to sit down with seniors and just share a little wisdom? Go to high schools, but what if we all say we owe it to this generation to help them? And I don't mean this in a condescending way. Let's not show up and say, I'm the fountain of all wisdom. I'm here to tell you what I know. That's not it.
Yeah.
It's go and ask questions and listen and offer insights and guidance. I think that is how we're going to help this generation really be more successful in the workplace. What's your take?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's right. And I think it's an interesting balance. I think the boomers tended to have a little coddling attitude towards millennials. I don't think you want to quite go that far. But I do think there should be an element of reaching down and, most importantly, thinking about when you were in your 20s, what were those maybe instinctual things you did that really helped set you up for success, and articulate that and give that as a playbook.
Yes.
Gen Z is really good about following a playbook.
Yes.
So for example, they may not know that it's valuable to go into the office and have FaceTime.
Yes.
That's really, really valuable. If you're working in an environment where it's hybrid, make it a point to be the person who's in the office the most.
Yes.
You will get noticed, and you'll be the person that they tap and say, wow, look at her, look at him, look at that initiative. It goes back to author-editor. Author, the traits of the author: take ownership, show initiative, display critical thinking. If you walk into a workplace with those 3 things kind of in your back pocket, you're going to do pretty well. And you couple it with a positive attitude, the sky's the limit for you. And I think that the more that we can encourage them and say, hey, it's okay to do this. Set up meetings. Come into the office. Find time to network. Ask questions. Don't just sit back and wait. I think that's important. I think the other part that is challenging for Gen Z is, there was we study, and the TED Talk that I did some years ago was on the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And so we study workplace emotions. And to kind of cut to the chase, not all emotions are equally contagious. This will come as no shocker. Post-pandemic, the most contagious emotion is anxiety. And so we have a little bit of an anxiety epidemic right now, particularly with our young people. And so they're anxious and they're concerned and they're worried. And there's a lot of reasons. They don't want to fail. They see these perfectly perfect social media profiles, and that puts extra pressure on them. And so it's hard for them to take a risk. So I think one more thing that we can do as leaders is encourage them to take risks, but make that a little safer.
Yes.
Let them know that you're there, you got them, that you're supporting them. If they fail, it's not the end of the world. They'll learn from it. It's developing those resilience skills that, and I also want to be fair about this too. We're talking about a generation in blanket terms. That's absolutely not the reality.
Absolutely.
There are Gen Zers that are just thriving and operate like boomers did or Gen Xers did. And then there are some that are struggling a little bit. So we're talking mostly about how to bring along the ones that are a little more the latecomers. But there are some that are thriving right now. So, but I think these are some extra things that we can be doing.
So let me pivot off of this great groundwork you're laying. I mean, you laid some amazing groundwork. So there are 3 things that come to mind. One is I want to talk about failure, because you and I are a combination of our failures and successes. You and I did not have all success in our career and then suddenly we made it. We have absolutely, we are the sum of our failures. So I can look back at failure and struggle and adversity throughout my entire life. I learned from all of it. It shaped who I am today. We also need to be conveying that it's okay to struggle and fail. We need to let people see, to your point, hey, if you do struggle, here's what you can get from it. Here's the lesson from it. And I think leaders have an opportunity to tell their true stories, not about, here's how I made it to the top, but let me tell you when I was at your level of my career, how I endured a lot of adversity and really help this generation understand and embrace the need for resilience. If you go through struggle, you'll build resilience, which will help you for the rest of your career. So that was one of the things I got from what you just said, and I just wanted to add that flavor to it. I think the second is credibility. You and I talk a lot about professional credibility. And this is something that I'm always telling students on campus and young professionals. Credibility is interesting because no one will ever tell you that you're not credible. When's the last time you heard that in a conversation? Mike, you're just not a credible person. But credibility is something that affects everybody. And if you're a Gen Z, if you're a young professional and you're wondering why you're not moving up the ladder, why you didn't get the promotion, why you got skipped over for the raise, why you didn't get the internship or the job, maybe, just maybe, you didn't show up as credible. Maybe your social media profiles were suspect. Maybe there was something questionable there. Maybe you weren't courteous or professional. Maybe you didn't show gratitude in the interview process. Maybe you were not responsive in communication, something that you talk about a lot. You know, all of these things, when they're not done well, can absolutely contribute to you not being seen as credible. And you know what? That older generation that's interviewing you, they're going to go to someone else that is credible. So that's the second point I would make. The third and final one, we've been skipping all around it and talking about it, but we're talking about mentorship. But it's not just one way. I think our generation needs to invest and mentor this generation, but there's so much that we can learn from them too. Listen, to your point, there are some amazing Gen Z young professionals out there. I know plenty of them. These are rock stars that are going to run the world, and I'm excited about it. And I learn from them every day. It's not just me dispensing wisdom. I am learning from them. So I think that we've got to make sure that everyone understands that we have something to gain from each other. So if you're a leader thinking about going and investing, make sure you bring your listening ears and you're asking good questions, because you might pick up something that will help you both understand, but also maybe change how you operate. So those are my three things.
You set me up perfectly, Randy. I mean, we're just passing the ball well today.
We've known each other 23 years. I think we've learned how to do this. Yeah.
So when you were talking about questions,
yes.
I want to take that and just expand on it.
Sure.
So let's talk about it from a young professional standpoint. For every young professional that's listening to this, I no longer want you to think of yourself as an employee, working at a job, getting a paycheck, whatever. Don't think of that anymore. You are your own business. And your manager is your number one customer. And so when you start to think that way, well, what do you want to do? I want to learn more about my customer. I want to make my customer happy. I want to meet their expectations. Well, how do you get there? The superpower: ask good questions. Listen. I think that's the huge missing ingredient, or potential ingredient. Maybe not missing, but potential ingredient that's key. Get curious. Start to learn more about your manager's expectations, and learn what you can do to get better. So I've got three kiddos. My middle child, Noah, he works at a restaurant as a server, and he had gone into food service, and he said, I really want to be eventually a server, and he worked his way up, and he's 19 now, so he's a freshman in college. What I admire about Noah is of my three kids, he's the least kind of naturally social. He's not one who's going to stand up and deliver some big long monologue. That's just not who the guy is. He's a little more introverted. And so when he started off as a server, he did okay. He watched his tips come in, he did okay. But he noticed there's another server who'd been there a long time who was really good. And I give him a lot of credit for this. So Noah went over to the guy and said, what do you do? Can I shadow you?
Yes.
And he started watching what questions the guy asked and the order in which he interacted and said things to the people who were coming into the restaurant, the guests. And Noah started putting that in place for himself. And all of a sudden his tips started shooting up. And he started developing new approaches. So I think even whether you talk to your manager or you target, a colleague that you think is doing a great job, getting curious, getting proactive, learning how to build your business, quote unquote, is key. And I think on the other side, it's really important for us as managers and leaders to not just assume.
Right.
Not just assume, just because that kid's quiet, that they don't have a point of view, or they're not seeing something we don't see.
Yes.
So asking them questions, testing your assumptions, that's a good practice for all of us. Keeps us from hubris and getting too arrogant and thinking we have all the answers.
Well, we talk a lot about the importance of specificity. If you're going to ask a question, please don't say, "You doing okay? Everything fine?" You'll get a generic answer. "Hey, listen, I've noticed that you seem to be struggling. I know you just joined the company. What are some things right now that you're curious about? What are some things that you're trying to figure out? What is it that I could do as your leader to help you?" Like, be specific if you're going to ask questions. And I would say this for both, Gen Z and older leaders, make sure that you're asking good questions that are going to require a real answer, because that's really helpful. I love that you're talking about curiosity, because one of the things that I would say is a great takeaway for young professionals today, but I would say this of any generation, we all could stand to be a lot more curious. I think, when I hear feedback about people that are interviewing Gen Z coming into the workforce, I hear this a lot. They show up, they state their background, they will regurgitate their resume, and then they go silent. And that is absolutely landing in a pretty flat way. So instead, show up with great questions. Can you tell me a little bit about, to your point, what it's like to be successful here? Can you tell me a little bit about what you're looking for in interns? My background says this. Is there anything about that would really line up well with your business? So ask good questions. If Gen Z would be more curious, I think that's something that would really help them thrive. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I think one of the things we're also really needing to stress today is the need for patience. This is not going to be fixed tomorrow. We can't wave our magic wand. But there's a lot of impatience right now and a lot of frustration. And I think it's Gen Z and older generations looking at each other with impatience. Let's take a breath. Let's just chill for a minute. And let's just find a way in our own circle of influence to make a difference.
Well, everything's urgent all the time.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that goes out the window is things like asking questions.
Yes.
Let's just make assumptions and go, right? So the Gen Z steps in and assumes, well, this is just going to be like my teachers or professors, and they're going to tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. And then the manager says, why aren't you doing stuff? I hired you to do stuff. Go
Which
do
plays
stuff.
into the narrative.
Yeah. And so they're not sitting down and asking questions. Well, what do you need from me? What can I do to support you? What can I start doing, stop doing, or continue doing to support you? And that question sent up that way can go both ways. Mm-hmm. The young professional can ask that of her manager or his manager, and that manager can ask that of her or his direct reports. What can I start, stop, or continue doing? Mm-hmm. One more important elephant in the room around this too is to acknowledge that to ask questions and be curious. For you and I, we take it for granted because we've worked on that muscle. It is a very strong form of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
A lot of people think if I ask that question, they're going to think I'm stupid.
Right.
Or I'm the manager. I should have all the answers.
Right.
And so those kinds of beliefs hold us back from that opportunity to really learn and connect.
And wouldn't you say that the most successful leaders you and I know are the most vulnerable?
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yes. And we often refer to that as humble.
Yes.
They're humble. And what it looks like is they ask questions.
Yes.
They'll put something out to their team or to their group and say, okay, now what am I not seeing here? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What should we be thinking about that we're not?
Yes.
Those kinds of questions. It elicits, a conversation from the room. And if they see someone hasn't spoken, they'll call them out. They'll say, Tina, no, she haven't said anything. I know you're thinking deeply about this. What's going on with you? Mm-hmm. What's going through your head? I'm curious. So asking those questions. So Randy, I know we've been going for a while. There's one more just tactical thing I think it's important.
Sure.
When I think about Gen Z and other generations, a tactical thing that is different, we could argue potentially behind, depending upon how we want to view it, is writing skills. Mm-hmm. So more specifically, the ability to write clean and clear emails. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage all young professionals that if you don't know if you're good at writing emails, get a friend of yours, get someone else who's a mentor to proofread some emails for a while.
Yes.
Because that generation is so quick on communication that they shorthand everything. Mm-hmm. Everything is some kind of instant message, direct message, text, and so everything's shorthanded. Mm-hmm. So punctuation's left out, lots of acronyms. Mm-hmm. That's perfectly fine in that kind of informal communication.
Yes.
But our world right now, at least for the last 30 years, has really been driven by email.
Yes.
And so you need to learn how to write a really clear and coherent email.
And that's not going to stop, by the way.
And probably not for a while until we have something else that takes that over. But that did come in about 30 years ago. And then now that's the way that business is conducted today. That's the modern version of a memo.
And one thing I'd add to that, though, Brandon, is I think if you're a young professional and you want to get better at your business writing, seek out mentorship. Don't just wait for it. Like, you've got to make sure you go to people that you think are doing things that you want to do, but also ask them for examples of business communication. Would you mind sharing what you think is a great email? I'd love to get a sense of what that looks like in our company. The other thing is, and we're both authors, so we're a little biased here, is be a good reader. I mean, if you read well, you're likely going to write well. So if you're constantly reading, especially leadership professional books, you're going to get a sense of what makes sense. So I know that we always kind of end our conversations with, asking the guest or whatever, what is like the key takeaway for the audience? Why don't we both do that for each other today?
Okay.
So I want to ask you, what is something that, what's the key takeaway? What's the big learning from today that you want to convey to everybody? And then I'll be glad to share one.
Probably just because it's on my mind and I'm deeply passionate about it. And we've already talked about it, but I'm going to double down on it.
Okay.
Big dramatic pause, Randy. Curiosity. Curiosity is the secret. Get curious. And the activation of that for a young professional is because you'll see it reciprocated if you do this. Stop viewing yourself as a student, as an employee. That's an editor role. That's a reactive role. Stop that. Be an author. Think of yourself as this is now my business. It's my business. It's me. Brandon Incorporated. But I'm the business. This is my client and customer. How can I learn more effective ways to serve them so that I can be effective and get opportunities? And I think that's also what's really, really important here. When you talk about quiet quitting and all those other things, those 20s is really an opportunity for you to not only learn what you're good at and not good at, what you like and don't like. It's an opportunity for you to really make some progress in building that foundation. So I would actually encourage folks in their 20s, use it as the season it's supposed to be, growth. There will be plenty of time to relax and enjoy vacations and think about your well-being. And don't disregard that, but this should be a high growth season. That's what your 20s are designed for, just as human beings. So I would want them to take advantage of it. And if they view themselves as a business of one, that may help them start down that path.
Love that. Absolutely love it. So 2 things that I would share that I think are key takeaways for everybody. If you're a young professional today, and I was talking to students on Tuesday about this, so it's fresh on my mind. Think about your career as going from learning jobs to doing work you love. So when you first get that first job, that second job, that third job, don't be dismayed if it's not exactly what you went to school for. It may not be the perfect job that brings you complete happiness. Look at every job as a learning job. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to take a skill away, something that I pick up, and I'm going to take it to the next job. And I'm going to keep growing in my learning and my capacity for leadership and my abilities. And one day, I don't know when it is, maybe it's 5 years for you, it was 25 years for me, you'll wake up and say, I now know what I was called to do. I know what I need to do. And for me, for the last 12 years, I only do work I love. But I spent 25 years figuring that out. So the journey from learning jobs to work you love is really critical. Don't ignore it and embrace it. The other thing is, and I'll close with a story, is my dad was an amazing relationship guy. Amazing. And for 38 years, he worked for John Deere. And when I graduated from UGA many years ago, he gave me the best advice that I would share with young professionals today or people coming into the workforce. He said, Randy, there are 3 things I want you to do that's going to help you build relationships when you get to your new job. He said, I really want you to think about being helpful, serve others, do what you can to be the person that will volunteer and help and get involved, do the extra work, take on the extra task. He said that will set you apart and help distinguish you. And he was right. It was great advice. Second thing he said is exactly what you said. Be curious. Ask a lot of questions. He said, you don't know anything about this new company. Have the humility to ask questions. Another bit of great advice. So, serve others, help others, be curious. And then the third thing, and I'll end with this, is he said, everyone that meets you should walk away from that feeling like that was time well spent. What he was talking about is add value. Always try to find a way to add value. So as a 21-year-old, I didn't really know what that meant, but over the years, I figured this out. I could make connections. I could be a good listener. I could give good advice. I could give the gift of a book, mine or others, share articles, lots of ways to add value. Why does that matter? 36 years later, that's still exactly how I build relationships. I'm here to help. I'm curious about you, and I want to add value. So that's the advice I would give to the next generation coming into the workforce.
I think that's great. I think the last thing I'd also add to this, as we were talking, I want to give this new generation coming into the workforce permission that it's okay to change jobs.
Yes.
It's okay. In fact, it can be really beneficial to you, because if you change jobs every 2 to 3 years in your 20s, not only do you learn new experiences and learn more about yourself, it also helps you kind of bump up your salary a little quicker.
Yes.
You can avoid salary compression when you do that. So there's some advantages of doing that. But again, we want to be proactive. We want to look for those opportunities. Be curious. What's something I want to try?
Yes.
It's a great opportunity to grow. Use your 20s to grow. Plenty of time to relax. Use those 20s to grow. Now, some people may agree with that advice. Some people may not. But I think it can be really, really helpful in setting that foundation.
But don't leave because you're struggling. Embrace the struggle. Learn from the adversity. Leave because it's a better opportunity to learn, not because you're struggling in your current job.
Yeah, great advice, Randy. Well, thank you, my friend. This was great.
Oh, what a pleasure.
We may have to do a part 2 at some point.
I think we will.